Awesome. What up, guys? Welcome to the intro session for our Beyond the Close podcast. I'm here with KC. So I thought it would be great for our first episode just to kick off and learn a bit more about the man that is KC. So when I met Kris, a lot of people don't know, we met through work. So I had a recruitment company. I'd built my team up to about 6 staff. We were doing really well. We were bringing in a heap of business. Some would say, we were selling well. I had also studied at the time, I think I was doing my MBA. I'd studied organisational psychology. I'd done a heap of leadership training, but I just could not manage these people that were working for me. And so Kris and I met through work. We were working together on a client. Shout out to Jack Henderson.
Shout out, Jack.
And Kris kindly offered to catch up for coffee. And we sat down and I started telling him a little bit about the business and, some of the troubles I was having with managing these people and getting them to sell. And I was blown away at the knowledge that Kris had. I didn't really know much about him until we had this coffee, but he started drawing out all of these models around prospecting, our pipeline, and how to get the most out of salespeople. And there was one little line that you said to me, which in hindsight, it's really, really quite simple, but it was pretty profound when you dropped it. And it was lead people, manage numbers. And so that really stuck with me ever since. But I think, Kris, you're the best kept secret in Australia, possibly the world. I'm going to go out on a limb and say possibly the world in terms of selling and particularly closing. Your knowledge is incredible. But tell us a bit about yourself, because I think your journey into sales is really fascinating as well. So I'd love for you just to kick off our podcast series with a bit of an intro into your background, how you got into sales, and then, how you got to where you are now.
Well, thanks for the intro, Sharni. It was very, the way that we met and now where we are is, it's always nice to look back at that story. And, the story for me goes back a lot of years with sales and business. I graduated high school barely. I don't even know if you could count it as a graduation. I finished year 12.
Yeah.
And
participation award.
Yeah, I was a terrible student, had no academic results, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and found my way into the police force. So, so that's a whole story in itself, how I got into the police force.
Funny place for you to end up.
It was. But it was a ready-made career. Got out of high school, which I was just hated, but got into the police. And, spent a few years in the police as a young man, 19 years old, police in the streets. But one thing you have to be in the police force, you have to communicate. You have to communicate really well. You have to lead people and influence people to do things, because you're not always using force. Very rarely using force, and you shouldn't really be using force. And because I was such a skinny runt of a kid as well, I was quite skinny at the time. And that was another reason why I got into fitness. I next went into fitness, but part of the reason I got into fitness was because I was so skinny, and I was having to influence these, grown men, thugs. Domestic violence was
Hobart.
Thugs of Hobart. Domestic violence was a big topic at the time when I graduated in the police force, and we're often working with people who are pretty heavy dudes. And I was, pimple faced. Thankfully, not thankfully, but I developed pimples after high school. So I didn't have pimples in high school. It wasn't until I finished high school, then I just magically got crazy. So I got the skinny guy, pimply face, telling or having to get someone to get out of their own house into the back of your car because there's been an argument. And a lot of times people are not happy with that. So influencing people in that respect, influencing and doing it in a way without force was really getting people to do things without having to force them to do them was what I had to learn really quickly. And then also developing interview skills. When you're in the police force, your arrest is only as good as the evidence that you could get. And so interviewing the offender and developing the interview skills is something I learned. I learned from really trained and experienced detectives on how to interview and how to ask questions and how to get information. So learning how to communicate and becoming a great communicator was something I learned pretty early on, through necessity, through being a cop. And as a 20, 21-year-old kid, being a police officer for me was not, the way I was back then wasn't going to be a long-term strategy because I was
wasn't the right culture.
Wasn't the right fit. So I moved on, and I moved into fitness and into personal training because I was passionate about training, passionate about fitness. Because of the police, because of my experience, and because I wanted to not only use my communication of how to use force, I wanted to be able to use force and be a bit stronger. So
you're also pretty into sport as well.
Yeah. I was playing sport and playing football. So that played a big part. But so I got into fitness, I got into personal training, moved to Sydney, and as a fitness trainer, you learn how to train clients, but you don't realize how much you have to sell. Like to train a client, you actually have to get the client first, and you have to sell. You have to market yourself, then you have to go and sell what you do. And I was, thankfully, because of my police career, the way that I was able to communicate, I found it quite easy. I found it super easy to communicate, to sell, because I know now what was happening. I was transferring a lot of my energy, certainly my passion for fitness, and people were buying me. I didn't have a process. I didn't have a method. I didn't have anything. I'd sat in front of someone. I could sort of identify the challenges, and I provided a solution. I was really enthusiastic, and they just bought me. And so I was quite successful quite early on, as a personal trainer, as a single personal trainer. And that led me to building a little business, which was called at the time Rapid Personal Training, which started off in 24-hour gyms. I went to 24-hour gyms, Anytime Fitness gyms around Sydney. I offered them to take on the personal training, so I was going to pay them some rent in exchange to be given exclusive access to market and sell to their gym members. And I ended up building a team of contractors, fitness contractors. And so initially I just did all the selling, and I just gave the clients to the trainers, and it was really successful. It was a really good model. It was great money. We had a great team, and we were crushing it in the first gym that I had this model in, down in Alexandria. But the second gym, I got a second gym. At this point, I was young. I got approached by another gym owner, and they were like, "Hey, what you're doing here is awesome. We'd love you to bring it to our gym." And without thinking, I was like, for sure, I want to scale, I want to go big. And so I took it on. And then I found myself a lot more busy. And so I wasn't able to get onto all the sales meetings. I wasn't able to meet the clients and the prospects. And so I'd at this stage, still no formal sales training, hadn't even read a book about it. But so I hired a salesperson, because I was spread a bit thin. So my first sales hire, the PTs were still not selling, but I hired a salesperson. His name was Darren.
Daz.
Yeah, Daz.
Dazza.
The D-A-Z. He called himself the D-A-Z.
The D-A-Z.
Yeah. Shout out to Daz if you're listening.
The D-A-Z.
And the D-A-Z came into the business, and we were going to grow this thing. We're going to grow it through salespeople. We're going to scale it.
I think that's a really important point. I was just about to say that. It's similar in both of our stories. I think it's similar for a lot of founders, and it's kind of, we'll get to the business we have now and why that was created, but you recognized pretty early on that the way you needed to scale was through selling. It wasn't through, getting more PTs who are really knowledgeable at what they do. It can become such a quick bottleneck if you don't teach someone else and replicate what you do as a founder to be able to sell.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll bookmark that. And it's right, business is sales and marketing really, and then you deliver a product. And so that in this case, the product was fitness. You got to have a good product. You can't really get by with a bad product. But most business owners make the mistake of just spending too much time on the product and nowhere near enough time on the pipeline.
Yeah.
So with the DAZ in place, I now ran into some challenges because being naturally selling, doing well, actually I didn't have a model for what I did. And so Daz comes in, there was no scripting, there was no process, there was nothing. And so he's now in the hot seat taking, I think we called them supercharged sessions at the time. So for a free fitness consultation, someone would come in and we assess their training, the way they train, what they want to achieve, and then, pitch them PT. And our sales results just plummeted.
Oh no.
Plummeted. And it was the problem we had and Daz had was everyone wanted to think about it. So I'd never really had that problem. It wasn't something that I'd run into personally, but now I've got the same leads that I used to that I was talking to and selling were now just all going away to think about it.
Yeah.
And
it could be very easy to just blame the salesperson for that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really common. Like when a founder's selling their conversions really high because they've got that passion, conviction, it's pretty hard to say no. And then someone else comes in and they can't convert at the same rate. And like you see it all the time. People are like, I've got a people issue. And it's like, well, no, you've actually got a process issue.
You've got a process issue.
Misdiagnosed.
Anyway, you've got a process issue. And yeah, founders can sell. Like I was a founder. I was the product. I was very passionate about it. I looked the part as well. I was very fit, and people just wanted to buy, and so there wasn't a lot of method to that, and it's not something you can duplicate. And I realized that, but I didn't realize that really when I hired Daz, but it really came to light quickly when our sales numbers dropped, revenue dropped, and everyone wanted to think about it. And the problem that I had was I couldn't help. I couldn't answer the question, how do I overcome this? What do I say? Because I didn't have a framework for what I did. And so I hadn't really looked at what was it that about my method or process that caused us to buy, people to buy. So I started looking for a training, a way to learn more about sales, and Jordan Belfort was coming to Sydney. So this all happened not long after this problem started to really arise. And Jordan Belfort comes to Sydney. He's got a 2-day event that he's running. And so I sign up and I go to this 2-day event with Jordan Belfort. He spoke in the Sydney CBD, and it was a masterclass. For me, it was the first time I'd ever really, there was no sales training, no formal sales training. And for me, I loved it because I loved it.
Yep.
And it was just, I was geeking out hardcore, and it was giving me structure. I was like, oh, I do that.
Mm-hmm.
I do that. Oh, so that's why this has been, there's a framework
It's so
for
funny.
selling.
My intro to sales was through Jordan as well. I, luckily or unluckily, didn't get to go and spend 2 days with him, but I had got given, when I started in real estate, I got given like 24 hours, I don't even know, like hours and hours and hours of DVDs of his course. And that was the first thing I had to do before I started in sales was watch his straight line course and master it. So interesting.
Yeah,
that's where he started as well.
So many people, I think, had the same. He was
Shout
the
out
OG.
to Jordan, hey?
Yeah, the OG, and one of the, and still, it's still so applicable.
Yeah.
So with Jordan's stuff, and it's applicable, but it's also changed, and sales have evolved since Jordan's. It's very much opportunity selling. It's very much pitch. It's very much, go in hard early, and then try to close, and then handle objections, and just and smash objections with all your dialogue. And has evolved now. And, we don't have the same approach now. So we sell in a different way, consultative way, but especially the way he was selling penny stocks. It was, on the phone, you've got a few minutes and here's the pitch. Let me picture this company, why it's going to be the next, big thing and why you should invest in let me just convince you. So although now we don't sell that way, at the time it really made sense, and there were some principles there that are applicable through the whole thing. And so part of it was like how to handle the objection. I want to think about it. So I developed the framework for that, or learned a framework for that, was able to teach Daz. And so I just went to work at really building out our system. So from that 2-day workshop, I went and built the rapid sales system. We then built that business. I was able to then ended up having a team of 6 salespeople. We had 40 trainers, across 10 different sites, Sydney and Perth, 40 plus trainers. And through sales and through building a framework and then teaching sales to, my salespeople, and then just duplicating a sales process, having a duplicatable process that was working. That business, we got to 3 million rev. We had a lot of staff and a lot of full-time staff. It was fun. I was there for, I think we had it from 2000 it finished in 2017. So I think it was 5 years that I was in business there. And we evolved from then having the sales team, there's so many things to learn about salespeople, like accountability, like skill set's one thing, and having a framework and having the ability to sell. But the other thing is getting performance consistently. Yeah. Funny story about Daz, and awesome guy, by the way, awesome guy, funny guy. But sometimes would go missing, for the first week of the month after he got his commission check. So there were times where
I don't think he'd be the only salesperson.
Yeah, we'd pay. We had a base salary plus commission that came at the end or start of the next month, and I'd get a phone call. Have you seen Darren? And there were bookings, there were appointments that being missed, and the PTs are in the gym going, well, Daz is supposed to be here. And there were times that I had to send people around to his house, knock on his door, because he wouldn't answer his phone. I'm like, what's happening? So, but I also had, at this point, I had a reasonable sized team, and numbers were quite fluctuating, and so just learning about the accountability and getting a CRM, getting a system in place. As how many calls have you made? How many offers have you, how's your follow-up? What, you haven't hit your numbers, let's diagnose that. For maybe the longest time, we're rocking up to sales meetings, we're behind on target, we're behind on the numbers. And everyone would just have excuses, but I couldn't verify. So I built a CRM, and eventually I booted the sales team, and we just totally transitioned to all the PTs were selling. So we empowered the PTs to sell. So over that period of 5 or 6 years within Rapid, I recruited, I think it was 150 trainers, a lot of salespeople. And that was my jam. I trained. I was the sales. I loved it. I trained them. There was a reason why I was successful. We were selling premium price fitness services to budget PT members. We were selling over $130 an hour PT to Anytime Fitness members. People who were paying people who were in a budget gym. They weren't there to spend a lot of money, but we were able to do that. And we often had a guy. The youngest trainer was 17, straight out of. We weren't able to attract the highest quality trainer either, because if they're really good, they'll do it themselves. Yeah. They don't need me. So you've got new trainers who've just finished their fitness certificates. They're now in a budget gym and they're having to sell a premium service. And so I learned so much about training and teaching my trainers how to do that and how to outperform their abilities, how to close, basically.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you want to get in touch with us, go to the Closers Dojo on Facebook. This is a Facebook group, free Facebook group for anyone looking to sell or build a sales team. We do sales trainings in there. We share a lot of resources. I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it.
And that was why we were able to be successful. Now, for many other reasons, the business went under, and it wasn't for our lack of ability to sell. There was, expense management. It was some of the contracts I'd entered into that were just not great with some gym owners. There was a few other reasons. So, as an entrepreneur, I learned some hard lessons.
The Rangy probably wasn't.
The Range Rover,
Good
the Range Rover Sport. I bought a Range Rover Sport before I'd invested in property, which was in hindsight, crazy. Yeah. But just a great example of who I was at the time as well. That business tanked, and I was then out on my, instead of a Range Rover Sport, I was riding a bicycle around Potts Point in Sydney, and I was deciding, what do I do now? I had a 12-month period of, negotiating with liquidators, with bankruptcy trustees. I managed to escape bankruptcy. All of my creditors, there was negotiation. So it was a crazy year, but the thing that I knew how to do was sell. And so I started sales consulting. I just got gigs to sell and to train sales teams. I worked in travel, accounting, financial planning, just places around Sydney, business owners who needed help selling or needed a process or needed training. I was just doing gigs basically as a sales trainer and a sales consultant. And so this is sort of around 2017, 2018 at this point. And one of my good mates, Benny, had started a business which was a high ticket. Well, at the time, we didn't realize it was called high ticket. It was just a business, and it was an education program to help property buyers agents turn into transition from whatever career they're in into a buyer's agent. And it was just starting, and I was in a position where I was broke, totally broke, just avoided bankruptcy. I was gigging sort of sales consulting around different businesses, and it was lumpy, and I was looking for a way that I could make money, but without being sort of stuck to Sydney. I was also ready to kind of leave Sydney, but I couldn't because I was so broke. I was so broke actually at the time. The reason why I couldn't leave Sydney is because I had a housemate in my apartment, which I'd lived in for many years, and they'd paid me a bond, but I was so broke I had to use the bond, and then so I didn't have the bond to pay back my housemate to then end the lease. That was how broke I was at this point, and so I was like, dude, I see you're on the phone, you're crushing, whatever you're doing, you're crushing it. Let me do some sale, let me sell, let me close some of these deals. We'd be at the cafe, and he'd pick the phone up. We'd be having a chat. He's on the phone again. He's closing a deal. He'd pick the phone up again. He's closing another deal. There's all these people coming back. He's closing deals. He's just constantly on the phone. And I was like, what the fuck is he doing? What's going on here? And he's like, dude, I made 70 grand. It was a 70K month. And we were like, what the, my God. And so I was like, man, get me on
humble
this.
Beginnings for Benny, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, very humble. Very humble.
Compared to where it is now. 70 grand.
Yeah, 70K. So I then started selling this offer on the phone. And so I'd gone from in-person fitness sales to then training travel consultants or financial planners who are selling, and other gym owners and PTs and whatever how to sell. And then I started in this remote online sort of sales profession, I guess. But it was gig, and there were calls, and the commission at the time was like $800 a sale. It was a 5K product, and leads came into my diary, and you open your diary up, and leads just drop in, calls are booked, and they've got questions that they've answered, I started jumping on these calls and thought I was a big shot. I thought I've got all the sales experience in the world. I've sold, trained salespeople. I've trained hundreds of salespeople, hundreds of my own staff.
Multi-billion-dollar business.
Yeah, I had a multi-million-dollar business, dozens of other clients that I'd had. And so I'd like, I'll crush this. Even though I didn't know anything about property, knew nothing about the product, didn't know anything about buyer's agents or property. And I got my ass handed to me for the first couple of weeks in remote high ticket sales. I got my ass kicked, and it was had whiplash. I was shocked at how different this was to being in person. Selling myself, selling fitness, which is, I know it's in my veins. Every part about me just emanates what it is, and so people bought me. So now selling something that I don't really know much about the offer, I have to rely on my selling ability and my ability to ask questions, deflect. If someone asks a question around like specific to the product, the industry, I have to kind of deflect it and put it back on them. And I got my ass kicked big time. And, phone as well, being on the phone. I was so used to being in person, being able to read their body language, being able to, make a stronger connection with them because you're in person and rely on that. On the phone, it was just this really quite transactional. It was quick, and it was demoralizing because I was getting I want to think about it. I was just getting my ass whooped, and I was very much at the stage where this is not going to work. I'm not going to be able to do this, and I felt quite defeated, and so at that point, by that stage, I'd done Jordan Belfort. I completed the full Sandler selling training course, which, if you look it up, like all the bit like Salesforce, HubSpot, all the tech companies that's the model that they use. Very comprehensive. But still, I wasn't really, wasn't this whole high ticket thing. So I did a course. I must have got targeted on Facebook. I jumped into a course. It was, Taylor Welsh from Traffic and Funnels. He's a guru in the industry, and it was called the Sales Mentor, and it was just this. It was essentially just a little training program. They just provided some scripting. They provided a bit of there was calls to listen to, and it just gave me just what I needed to kind of transition my sales skills from in-person and fitness and just selling to now on the phone or remote selling. And it gave me just that nice framework to then, and things clicked. And so then I started making good money. Then it was like, deals were coming through. I was closing. I was getting deals on the phone, one call closing, consistently taking credit cards. And
paid back your bond to your
paid back the bond. So I paid back the bond. Moved out of Sydney, moved to Bali. Actually, moved to Bali. There was a stage I moved back to Tassie. But just got the hell out of Sydney. Moved to Bali, and so I was remote closing and living the life. And in the end, for the first 12 months of that year of my remote closing kind of career, I made more money than I'd paid myself as a business owner at Rapid. I was paying myself $250 at Rapid. That was what I was paid, which was a significant amount of money to sort of just pull out of your business.
Yeah, I think
that
there'd be a lot of business
salary.
owners paying themselves
less than
much more modest wage than,
much more modest
than $250.
Yeah. But I made more than that in my first year of remote sales, and I didn't have any of the hassles. Yeah. The thing that I really loved about this sort of high ticket remote selling thing was that after being a stressed out business owner, I spent 12 months going through liquidation, speaking of bankruptcy trustees, losing
redundant.
Had to make all of my staff redundant, had to tell everyone they didn't have jobs anymore. Demoralizing. There's some media, not big media, but like smart company. There was some articles, and it was a hard year. And after all of that, getting to the point where I was able to, in the first year out, not only replace that income but increase it, through, and I was only doing, it wasn't like I was full time either. I was working sort of 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours a day. There would be some days which would be longer, but I opened up my calendar and drop things in, but I still had gym and other hobbies. But to replace the income and increase the income that what I was earning in the last business, I thought was pretty incredible. And so that that transition into high ticket was quite abrupt, and I'm glad I sort of worked it out. And then
maybe fast forward. So like if you could give everyone a picture of today, where you're at, like with the team that you're managing, and a few of the other things that you're doing, and then we'll tell everyone a bit about how we got to where we are, and the potty.
Sounds good. So that business that I was closing in dramatically grew, and over the past, since 2017, 18, I've built the team. So we built the team, Benny and I, we built the team, the sales team, and we built a function, which now, there's 12 sales reps. We do, high, high 6-figure, sometimes 7-figure months in revenue. So last year it was an 8-figure sales team. So we basically built an 8-figure sales team. Conversion rates around 40%. Cash collected 80%. So it's a really, really high performing sales team. And it's taken a lot of work to build that and to get to the point where we are such a high performing team. And I've also been lucky enough through that journey now to have a lot of clients who come who are selling, people who are selling, maybe people who've gone through that course, who've now built their own sales team, who want help with growing their own team and training their team. So that's where we're at now, which is a sales training business. So I'm sort of full circle from police officer, fitness business owner, to then a sales trainer, which was my kind of gig after a fitness business blew up, to now going full circle back to being in that position, sales training, which is really where I love. So training salespeople, recruiting sales reps, and just helping business owners scale their sales teams.
Nice. Yeah, I think when I guess the journey for us coming to be in business together. So to give context for everybody, when Kris and I met, and we knew each other for a little while, and eventually we ended up being in a relationship together. And the call that kind of sparked our little romance was actually Kris calling me to say, hey, I need to set up a recruitment company. I've got all these reps who are like getting training, and they're, I'm training them to be salespeople, but I've got nowhere to place them. I've got no jobs to put them in. And I was like, hang on a second. I've got all these sales jobs that I can't find candidates for. So just send them to me. Just make my job easier. Send them to me. And like, that's the model.
You'll be able to find a home for them.
I'll find a home for them. And so then we, started chatting more, and, eventually ended up being in a relationship. And when we came together in our relationship, we were kind of both working from home, and there'd been so many conversations about a lot of what I'd always been pretty good at, I would say, is finding the person and then finding them the right fit. And I'd always worked off the equation of the person plus the environment equals the behavior or equals the performance. And so the more we started working together, the more we realized I was good at that part, like, finding them the right home. You were really good at finding the people because you had all the contacts, you were training all of the people, and you were making them the person that they needed to be good at the job. And so it made sense for us to put it together. And so that's why, we've now got synergy.
It's the perfect combination.
It's so good.
And that's where synergy, the name synergy, was derived.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's where we're at now. I guess this episode, definitely so glad to hear your story. But we also need to give people an idea of what the podcast series is going to be about. So I guess if you want to give a little bit of an intro to what we're hoping our audience will get out of the potty.
Well, the podcast, it's a project that aims to help two, I guess, specific types of listeners. Now, the first listener is anyone who is either in sales or who's wanting to get into sales. And so we're going to be interviewing some of the best salespeople, some of the best business owners who sell as well. And we're going to be unpacking what it is that makes them successful in sales, how they sell. We're going to be looking at the unique parts of selling in different industries as well. And so as a sales rep or someone who wants to transition into sales, you're gonna get a lot of tips, strategies. You're gonna get principles that will help you sell better. It's really just about helping you sell better. And then the second type of listener who this is really going to be relevant to is business owners. Business owners who either are wanting to build a sales team, or they have a sales team and they want to know how to actually grow and develop their sales team to get more out of the team, because that's really the key. The first one is getting off the phones yourself or getting off the sales calls yourself. That's a big step for a business owner, is delegating sales. Like me with Daz, what this is going to help you do is potentially make it a bit of a smoother transition from when I got Daz, and help you find the first rep, know how to process or know how to map out your sales process, know how to delegate, know how to manage your first rep, know how to manage things just in the beginnings of starting your sales team. Or if you've got a sales team like I had, and you got guys showing up and they are, they're not hitting their targets, they have excuses, and you don't know what to do. And so we're going to be interviewing business owners who have sales teams, and we're going to be understanding, how did you grow your sales team? What do you do in terms of management, and how do you lead the sales team to achieve success? So I'm excited. We got the other thing as well. I want to be interviewing athletes. Like a lot of sales is measured on outcomes and results, much the same as sports is measured on the result. Whether you won, whether you lost, no one cares how much you trained. No one cares how many hours you put in. They just care about what was the result. So I'm going to be interviewing. We'll be interviewing some sports people to extract some tips on high performance.
Epic, cool. Well, that pretty much sums it up. Reach out to us as well if you're watching this and there's something specific that you want covered in the podcast. You can contact Kris either on Facebook or Instagram at Kris Cochrane, and same for me. I'm a little bit harder to get a hold of these days because I'm looking after our baby girl.
You're a mum.
I'm a mum first and foremost. But yeah, reach out if there's anything you want
sales,
covered.
By the way.
Much
harder than
baptism
sales.
of fire. I'd run a business. I'd bootstrap a startup any day over being no. I would prefer to be a mum, but
the work is much harder. Yeah, shout out to parents. Shout out to parents. The real MVPs are the parents.
Absolutely. Yeah, killer. But yeah, reach out to us if there's anything you want covered, or you'd find really interesting, any special guests that you'd like us to get on, please let us know. But yeah, we're looking forward to putting this project out and helping you learn about sales.